Welcome to Front Office Pros. The NFL Scouting Combine has now come to a close, and we witnessed most of the offensive prospects for the upcoming NFL Draft. And you NFL fans and dynasty owners may be wondering which offensive prospects increased or decreased their draft stock. With me is Dustin Ludke, who was at the Scouting Combine in Indianapolis to give us his unique perspective. Now it's time to talk about the wide receiver and tight ends. Hopefully you've already watched the quarterback edition of our Combine Risers and Fallers and our defense edition. But before we get started, I am going to ask you to write in the comments which wide receiver or tight end prospect do you think increased or decreased their stock the most for the 2023 draft.
Hike!
All right, so the first player we need to talk about is most likely regarded as the top wide receiver prospect in this draft, and it's the former Ohio State Buckeye, Jaxon Smith-Njigba. He measured at 6'1", 196 pounds with an arm length of 30.5 and a hand size of 9. Smith-Njigba elected to not run the 40-yard dash, but we did see him record a 35 vertical jump, a 10.5 broad jump, a 6.5 send 3 cone drill, and a 3.93 20-yard shuttle. Now, those agility numbers for the cone drill and shuttle are elite numbers. Jaxon Smith-Njigba had an underwhelming season last year, only playing in 3 games due to a nagging hamstring injury. He ended up just having 5 catches for 43 yards and 0 touchdowns. Dustin, you were at the Combine. What did you see in Jaxon Smith-Njigba when he was in the receiving drills, and what do you think of his performance? Do you think he increased or decreased his stock?
I mean, it's hard to increase your stock when you're already the number one receiver coming in. But I think he pulled away a little bit more. Most of the guys, when they catch the ball, you can hear it hit their hands. Like you hear that, hit the ball hitting the gloves. You didn't hear that with JSN. Like he's got such soft hands that it was just like there was no sound. Like, and I'm in the stands, 10 rows up, like they're catching not too far from me. I could hear it when it hits most people's hands. Like you hear him, he just, and just, it was effortlessly and so soft. He looked good, like noticeably better. And then when we watched him do his 3 cone drill, like you watched that, and that was right in front of us. It was clear. It was like, oh, that's good. Like that's, and we're not timing it. Like I didn't have a stopwatch. We watch it and you just go, oh, that looked amazing. I mean, they're record-setting numbers, and I think that like the one of them, it was like the gap between 1 and 2 was bigger than like the gap between 2 and 4. Like he said, like historic numbers for those. It's hard to say he's a riser when he was already the one in that group, but definitely solidified it and definitely I think pulled away from the other one. So riser for me, even though he couldn't rise anymore, but he confirmed above and beyond what we thought. 40 is going to matter, right? The talk was you're not running the 40 because you're slow. I don't care. Like he may not be. I will say this. We talked to a guy who talked to his agent last night, and this Sunday when we're recording, we talked to Saturday night. They're not sure JSN is going to have the volume to be a wide receiver 1 in the league, but has the ability to be a number 1 in the league. They expect him to go somewhere in the late teens to end of the first round in the draft. Like that's where his agent was expecting him to go, at least from the reports from the people that I heard that said they talked to the agent. Volume is going to matter, landing spot's going to matter, but he has the skill set to do it. Like he's got everything you want in a receiver of his scouter. Like it was just super confirming that yes, he should be the one in the group.
Yeah, so I'm going to disagree with you slightly. I think he's a considerable riser. I do think he was the number 1 receiver going in, but I think the separation that he created, which is impressive because everybody wants to know about the 40-yard dash time. But like you said, that 3 cone drill was unbelievable. And when you think about his counterparts, I mean, you've heard in interviews that Garrett Wilson, his former teammate, would tell you that he was the best out of him, Olave, and Smith-Njigba. Okay, well, Garrett Wilson was 6 foot 183. Olave was 6 foot 187. Wilson was drafted number 10 in the NFL draft. Olave was drafted number 11 in the NFL draft. So you're talking about Smith-Njigba, who was 6'1", 196. So he's, right around that same profile. Now, he's not the same player as those 2 guys. and he's probably not going to get that 4.3 40-yard dash. But that cone drill, for what he's going to be doing, he's a slot guy. And for him to be in that slot, I mean, I feel like the slot receiver in general is becoming more and more important in the NFL. It's becoming more of a prominent role. I mean, you're seeing players a la Cooper Kupp who is just torching teams in the slot. So I think it's a very coveted position. To me, this might be bold, I don't see him getting past 12 with the Texans. I could be wrong about that, but I think in my mind, where I say he was a riser, I agree with you. I think he was in those late teens, maybe early to mid 20s. Now I think he's going to go around where Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave went. We'll see. The 40-yard dash time, if it's really slow, that might affect things. And there was a worry about the hamstring injury. So I don't know from a medical standpoint. We don't get privy to that. Maybe medical wasn't that great. But as long as the medical checks out, obviously he was a great player, in 2021. To me, I think he's going to get drafted, pretty high, and that's why I think he's a riser.
Yeah, I mean, I think the gap definitely widened, but I think part of that is the people behind him didn't do so well, so they fell and he moved up a little bit. Right, he could go to the Texans at 12. The Texans could easily take Stroud at 2 and him at 12, and right, that's the kind of the new hotness in the NFL is connecting, college quarterback and wide receiver together. For me, JSN, it reminds me a lot of Stephon Diggs. Diggs has always been a great receiver, but never gets talked about as a top 3-4 guy because he's not the flashy, he's not Justin Jefferson. He's not Jamar Chase. But like, if you have Diggs as your number receiver, as you can see the Bills, now obviously we're Bills fans, so we have a special interest in
Diggs. We're biased.
We're a little biased, but for years, Diggs was the guy that you could get. And you could get him in drafts in the second round and get first round production out of him. So when we're talking rookie drafts, I think JSN goes at 104. I think that's where he's going to get drafted. If I'm at 106 and I get JSN, I'm super happy, right? Because I think I'm going to get a guy. Now, you're not going to get these 11 catches for 120 yards and 2 touchdowns. You're probably going to see 4 catches for 70 yards and a touchdown, right? Like he's not going to have the volume because he just doesn't have, for me, the size. And I don't think he's going to have the speed to be, Tyreek Hill or, that kind of thing. He's not going to be Jefferson where he's just going to burn guys and get open. But he seemed like a solid route runner, like Diggs. I think Diggs is the best. And I don't really love player comparisons, but that's the type of player I think you're getting that's solid, consistent production, who can be a top 10 guy in the league. Probably not year 1, but maybe year 2, depending on where he goes. But if he goes to Houston, he's the number 1 wide receiver in Houston, and he gets CJ Stroud, I'll take it. Right, we saw Brandon Cooks do really well there when Brandon Cooks wanted to play in Houston. We've seen Stephon Diggs be on Minnesota before they had Jefferson, be productive. He's productive now on the Bills. I'm not worried about JSN in the league at all. I think you're right. He could go 12 to the Texans. I think he could go past there. I think a team could move up to get him, but obviously there's a lot of trading happening probably at the top of the draft, but he's going to be good.
Yeah, I think he's locked into the number 1 dynasty receiver spot unless he goes to a miserable place like Baltimore or something. But if he goes, and then maybe somebody like Quentin Johnston goes to this dreamy location. That to me is really the only thing that could change things. But as far as the profile of player, I think his route running is just so crisp. It really does. He's just really coming in the NFL at the right time, where I think that they look for that sort of thing. So the next player we're going to be talking about is wide receiver from the USC Trojans, wide receiver Jordan Addison. Jordan Addison participated in most of the drills until he finished the day with a back strain. He'll look to finish the rest of those drills at his pro day. Jordan Addison measured at 5'11", 173 pounds with an arm length of 30 7/8 and a hand size of 8 3/4. He then ran a 40-yard dash time of 4.49 with a 10-second split time of 1.56 and a vertical jump of 34 and a broad jump of 10.2. The former Pitt Panther transfer played 11 games in the 2022 season for the USC Trojans and finished with 59 receptions, 875 yards, and 8 touchdowns. Dustin, what did you think of Jordan Addison's performance, and do you believe he was a riser or a faller in your mind?
I have him as a faller. I'm sad. I had Addison as my number 1 guy right there with JSN. I think he's fallen to 3, if not 4. He didn't get a
Mm,
lot of buzz. I was hoping he would be 6 foot, if not taller. He's obviously not. He's 5'11".
right.
I was hoping we would see a little more. Now he got this back strain. Part of the problem also was so when they do drills at the combine, they just start him. There's no like announcement they're starting to start him. And he was the first guy at every drill because obviously it's alphabetical order.
Right.
So like if you weren't like so they do let's say they do the 40s and then they all huddle around and the coach tells them what to do. And as the media, we're sitting there talking, oh man, this guy ran 40. We're looking up the official times as they're coming in. And then also we look up and the drill started and Addison's like done. We're like, wait, we missed Addison. So like wasn't not like he did anything bad. It's just a lot of it got missed unintentionally because it's just like, oh wait, they started it. Oh, they're with Addison. I guess we missed it again. Um, he had a good combine, but not a great combine. I just wanted to see something more from him. I wanted to see him be up there in those. Not he didn't have to break records, but like he wasn't really topping anything for me. He was okay. He was average, and I was expecting him to be above average in most of those things. I was expecting him to be 6 foot. Coming in under that concerns me slightly because I thought that was part of not that 6 foot's all that tall, but like 5'11's great. It's only an inch. Was just concerning. So I have him a faller. I think he's 3 when I had him at 1B, and now I think he's clearly 3 and possibly 4. Landing spot's going to matter for him a lot.
Yeah, it's going to be really. I agree with you. Landing spot is going to be a big, big factor as far as how early he produces and how enticing he will be to take in your dynasty fantasy football drafts. To me, he would definitely was a faller. The 40-yard dash time was a disappointment. I mean, you
Yeah.
even heard it from Daniel Jeremiah, who had him regarded as his number one receiver in this draft, similar to you. And I think, like you said, it was just kind of blah. Yeah, he
Yeah.
didn't really. There was no spark. He didn't really show anything, and that's where does the you always talk about like game speed. He's faster in game speed than he is with the testing. Maybe that's the case for him. I think coming off his season in Pittsburgh, he had an unbelievable season. You would have thought he would have done even better with Caleb Williams throwing him the ball versus Kenny Pickett, but that wasn't the case. So I think at the end of the day, he's definitely a faller. I think he's definitely a first round pick still. I wouldn't be shocked. Well, I mean, it'd be kind of a shocker if he made it the second round. I think he definitely gets drafted in the first. But the thing is, he doesn't. He has no real specialty, and that's where like you're gonna have guys like get enamored with Quentin Johnston and say, oh, he's got the size, he's got the yard after catch ability. Then you've got JSN, who's this great slot receiver. Then you've got Zay Flowers, who, he's got the quickness and the burst. So it's like you've got all these different things. And you've got Addison, who is just, it's just there's nothing really prolific about him. So we'll have to see. Maybe he does better at his pro day in USC. But at the end of the day, I think he is a faller. It's just a question of how much did he fall. I'm with you. I think as far as wide receiver ranking goes, off the top of my head, I think he's now 4 for me.
Yeah.
And I think going into it, I had an open mind. I kind of saw really 1 through 4, honestly, as kind of all like jumbled together. And I really wanted to see what would happen. And this definitely caused him to drop.
Yeah, I had 1 through 3 in the group. Like it was JSN, Addison, and Quentin Johnston as the top 3, and I was wondering if one of them would fall out or a fourth guy would jump in. I think someone else jumped in. I think he has Addison slightly fallen out. In dynasty drafts and started rookie drafts, you get him at the 107, 108. I think you're happy if you get him as the third receiver off the board. I think probably 2, maybe even 3 running backs go ahead of him. I will also say that the back strain is not anything to worry about. It didn't seem like an issue. Like no one really noticed it happen. It also sounds like he's just not out there for the next drill. So it's not like he was down on the field and they had to come to. He just did his drill and then he just didn't show up again. So I wouldn't worry about the injury. It's not like that was a major concern, but I still think he's going to be good. He's going to be just one of those he's going to be for me like a Keenan Allen type, like where you're like, he's good, he's good. Like you're just not excited about it because he's not going to put up those dynamic plays, but he could be a guy that gets a ton of volume too. Like he could be a Deontay Johnson and have 1,000 yards but no touchdowns, right? Like that's in that realm of possibilities for him.
All right, so next player we're going to be talking about is the standout receiver from Boston College, wide receiver Zay Flowers. Zay Flowers participated in most of the drills besides the agility drills. Zay Flowers measured at 5'9", 182, with an arm length of 29 1/4 and a hand size of 9 1/4. He then ran a 40-yard dash time of 4.42 and a 10-second split time of 1.53, a vertical jump of 35.5, and a broad jump of 10.7. In his senior season, he played 12 games and finished with 78 receptions, 1,077 yards, and 12 touchdowns. Dustin, what did you think of Zay Flowers' performance, and was he a riser or faller in your mind?
A huge riser. He came out of that glob of like 4 through 10 and really jumped into that top tier for me with those other three. He looked just different and special in all those drills. Like watching him from the effort, from the way he was doing things. So when they do this gauntlet drill where they have to go from side to side and catch balls, a lot of them are running at half speed. He's like, I'm going. I'm putting 100% into this. He was going full speed and still made all the catches. Just looked completely different out there than most of the other guys. He's smaller, and most of the draft class is smaller. But he just showed that he just looked different. Like it didn't look like there was anything he wasn't going to catch. Like if their ball was anywhere close to him, which they were, he pretty much caught it.
Yeah, I mean, throughout the broadcast, Jeremiah, and I'm not a huge fan of comps, but one of the comps that he had made was Tyler Lockett, and
Yep.
man, I saw it. I definitely saw it. I was a huge fan of Zay Flowers coming in, and man, he, like you said, that you could see the quickness in his cuts. You could see the quickness as he went for the ball. I mean, he just was going in stride when he caught the ball. So for me, I was already a big Zay Flowers fan. To me, he's in my top. He's probably my second receiver right now, honestly.
Wow.
I'm a big fan of Zay Flowers.
That's bold.
Yeah, so we'll see where he goes, but I'm a big fan of his. I think he could do really well in the NFL. So the next player we're going to be talking about is wide receiver from the University of Tennessee, wide receiver Jalin Hyatt. Jalin Hyatt participated in most of the drills besides the agility drills. Jalin Hyatt measured at 6 foot, 176 pounds, with an arm length 32.5 and a hand size of 9. He then ran a 40-yard dash time of 4.4 with a 10-second split time of 1.5, a vertical jump of 40, and a broad jump of 11.3. In his junior season, he played 12 games and finished with 78 receptions, 1,267 yards, and 15 touchdowns. Dustin, what did you think of Jalin Hyatt's performance, and was he a riser or faller for you?
A huge faller. He talked a big game in press conference. Said he was going to run 4.3. He was possibly going to break the record, and then ran a 4.5. Like, and then he dropped the most passes. I will give to his defense, he was getting passes for mostly the crappy quarterbacks in his group. You know, I don't want to say crappy, but I'm going to say like Malik Cunningham and some of those other guys. Like he wasn't getting the balls from Stetson Bennett or Max Duggan or Will Levis. Like it's just the way the rotation worked. But everything about him, like everyone had so much hype for him, and it was just meh. It was so bad. And you're like, oh, here he comes. And then nothing. And then he got on the go routes. He finally got a chance to get one from, I want to say it was and we knew it. We saw it coming. Like we figured out. Like
it was Levis.
Here's Levis and Hyatt, and I think he dropped it. Like he did. It was just like and he was there. He just didn't catch it. Like he didn't track the ball well. Everything about it just looked meant like some of his breaks he kind of slipped a little bit. For someone who talked a big game, it really was like he just couldn't back it up on the field.
Yeah, here's my thing with Hyatt. He's definitely a faller in my mind. I agree with you. Yeah. And I saw what you saw. He had several drops. He's already not known for being a good route runner. Now I've seen some on Twitter say, "Well, what are you saying? Like he had a good 40 time." Yeah, he had a good 40 time, but it wasn't a great 40 time. I thought it was going to be reminiscent to the Darius Hayward Bays, John Ross of the world, But because his calling card is breakaway speed, it's going to be, when people say, oh, he's going to take the top off a defense and he's going to score. And for me, he didn't have that breakaway speed. So you've got all these other knocks against his game. I think, the NFL loves speed, so maybe he gets drafted in the late first round. But to me, I think he's a fall. I think he's going to get drafted in the second round. And he would not be in that muddled group of later receivers, he would not be my first choice.
Let's talk 40 times. 4.5 is fast. For like, I can't run a 4.5. If I run the 40, it's probably like 7 seconds, right? I'm old and fat and out of shape. 4.5 is a good time, but not when you're talking that you're going to run a 4.3 and there's guys out there running 4.4s and 4.3s. If he was the fastest guy at 4.5, sure, but a fast NFL wide receiver is 4.4, 4.3s. Yes, he's fast for a human, but not for an NFL receiver. And when we watch the defensive backs run a bunch of 4.3s and 4.4s, he's slower. Like, if you put all the wide receivers and cornerbacks together, he's way down the list. He's a one-trick pony at this point for me. He's the Will Fuller, just like, I'm going to go down the field and catch him. He's what Deshaun Jackson is now. He's just going to have that role on the team. I don't see him playing every down. So fantasy drafts, I'm taking him in the 3rd round. I think he gets drafted in the 3rd or 4th round in the NFL draft.
Yeah, I mean, we'll definitely find out. And the next player we're going to be talking about is a wide receiver from LSU, which is a wide receiver factory, but wide receiver Kayshon Boutte, or Boutte, whatever your preference is. He measured at 5'11", 195 pounds with an arm length of 31 3/8 and a hand size of 9 1/2. He then ran a 40-yard dash time of 4.5 with a 10-second split time of 1.58, a vertical jump of 29, and a broad jump of 9.10. In his junior season, he played 11 games to finish with 48 receptions, 538 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Dustin, what did you think of Kayshon Boutte's performance, and was he a riser or faller in your mind?
If I'm Kayshon Boutte, I come out and say my last name is Boutte, not Booty, because he looked like straight booty. He was garbage. He looked horrible out there. Everyone thought he was going to be good. Everyone thought he was going to be that guy to jump from that muddled group of 4 through 10 into the top 3, and he just didn't impress in anything. He just did poorly in almost every drill. Nothing about him. So, like, I think he's like a round 3, round 4 guy in the NFL draft now. Like, I think he was a late first possibility, and I think he dropped a ton. So he's a huge faller for me. Nothing special about him at this point. He might be he might be out of my top 10 in wide receivers in this class.
Yeah, to me, he's a huge faller as well. Honestly, he might have been the biggest faller. I mean, that vertical jump is atrocious. I don't even know how
I'm pretty sure I can jump higher. Yeah, I think I can jump higher than that.
Yeah, that was bad. And to me, so it's like, when a player has character issues, if they're really athletic or they perform so strongly, teams will overlook him. Now, I'm not going to get too much in the details because I don't really know because it seems alleged, but he to my understanding, he was going to go back to LSU. And then there was some rumblings about some stuff that happened during, like, around the bowl game. And then after that, Brian Kelly's like, don't come back. And then he just was like, I'm going to enter into the draft. Teams are going to figure out what that is, and they're going to sniff around and figure out what happened. Us normal fans and, content creators, we're not going to know this stuff until maybe the draft when we find out, wow, why is Boutte available in the 6th round? Shouldn't he have been drafted in the 2nd or 3rd? So to me, his performance doesn't look that great. His athleticism wasn't that great. The 40-yard time was no good. To me, I wouldn't be shocked if he goes undrafted. If those character issues are as bad as they are, I could totally see him going undrafted. I could see him going a day 2 or day 3. But I'll tell you this. I saw him pretty consistently in, just offense dynasty leagues. As, probably I'd say 12 team leagues. He was going in the 1st round. That shouldn't be happening anymore. He should not be a 1st-round player. I'm taking Hyatt over him. Even though I thought he was a faller as well. Like, to me, he might. I mean, obviously, at some point, he's worth value, but in my mind, he's kind of off my draft board at this point, unless it's a screaming value.
Yeah, he's the new Bryan Edwards for me. Like, right, Bryan Edwards came into the league. He was drafted high. Him and Henry Ruggs were like, oh, they're going to be this new dynamic duo in for the Raiders in Las Vegas, Oakland at the time, and then neither of them, like, well, obviously Ruggs is out of the league for off the field issues, and Bryan Edwards is out of the league because he just sucks. I think that's where Kayshon Boutte is. I think he could get drafted, and I think people will be like, "Oh, the talent," but he'll fix his issues and he'll mature. He's probably off my draft boards for fantasy, unless it's like 4th round, and I just need to throw him on my taxi squad and see what happens. But I'm not expecting anything from him production wise.
Yeah, I agree. So transitioning over to the tight ends now, the next player we're going to be talking about is tight end from Notre Dame, tight end Michael Mayer. Michael Mayer measured at 6'4", 1.5", 249 pounds, with an arm length of 31 and 5/8 and a hand size of 9.5. He then ran a 40-yard dash time of 4.7 with a 10-second split time of 1.66 and a vertical jump of 32.5 and a broad jump of 9.10. In his junior season, he played 12 games and finished with 67 receptions, 809 yards, and 9 touchdowns. Dustin, what did you think of Michael Mayer's performance, and was he a riser or faller in your mind?
I have him as a faller. I think he was talked about as the 1-2, like 1B with Kincaid, who obviously Kincaid didn't do anything because he's injured, but didn't impress, right? And this tight end group is stacked, and watching them perform, they all performed really well because they're all so good. But there was guys who stood out and he did not, and you really wanted him to. He didn't stand out in the 40. He didn't stand out in any of his like vert or broad jump. He didn't stand out in like when we were watching the blocking. They're pushing the blocking sled. There were some guys who were like literally just like flung it one hand. And I don't say he struggled with, but it didn't look like he was dominating. He didn't really dominate in the pass catching drills. Just was unimpressed by him across the board.
Yeah, I think when it comes to Mayer, he's a faller for me as well.
Yeah,
and so much so that to me, it's like I clearly have Kincaid over him as yes. One, even though he didn't perform. But when it comes to Mayer, he's an all-around tight end. He's able to block. I know what you were mentioning. He definitely didn't do as strong in that drill because I remember what you were saying. But he has the numbers. I mean, he's produced really well for a receiving tight end. So he's definitely going to go in the first round. I'm almost positive of that. But when you look at the top 10 tight ends in receiving yards, the average profile last year, you're looking at 6'4", 5'8", 249 pounds, and then a 40-yard dash time of 4.62. So Mayer's right around there. He's right on the dot with the weight. He's a little shorter in the height, but he ran a 4.7, which he didn't run well. And I think to me the concern is I see why people call him Baby Gronk. I know they throw out that all the time, but I really see it because my big concern with him is I don't think he can create separation. He makes a lot of contested catches, but it almost looks like he's barreling down the field. And I remember this because I watched it so many times with Gronk. It's just he's rumbling down the field. Like it looks like very jerky, very clunky. He gets the ball, he ends up doing well. So I think he's going to be good. But to me, I prefer a guy like Kincaid, who to me he has more yards after catch ability, and he just makes really athletic up top catches, and he's creating separation. Like he almost reminded me of Travis Kelce, the way he was creating separation. So yes. I think Mayer can be good. I just feel like at the end of the day, he's definitely a certain profile of tight end, but I wasn't as impressed because people were really hyping him up, I feel like, this draft cycle.
Yeah, he'll have to get to a spot where he's playing that Mike Gesicki type role where he's a tight end but plays that off the line kind of slot receiver spot because he just doesn't block well. But again,
you sure about that? I'm pretty sure he's a good blocker.
He does block well, but like he's not overly big and strong. Where I think like he's not going to be able to hold down the edge like a true blocking tight end, right? Like tight ends are either pass catching tight ends or blocking tight ends, and you have some like George Kittle who really excels at both. I don't think Mayer can be that like, hey, we're gonna sit you out here and you can help out on the line. I think he's gonna be in a system where he's gonna need moved out. But you're right, he doesn't create separation. He's more the guy like he'll chip and then get out. Like he's gonna chip and go on the flat and do those like tight end screens. He's not gonna just stay in and block. So most teams, if I'm starting a team from scratch and I bring him in, I also need to bring in a true just straight up blocking tight end because I can't. Yes, he does do well at it, but that's not his profile, I don't think, in the league. If he just becomes a blocking tight end and he loses that pass catching ability because he's slow and lumbering, then he's not good for fantasy. So in fantasy wise, you want him to be in that kind of slot role and not blocking, but he may just end up being a blocking tight end. I think he's off my board. There's other tight ends I like for dynasty. So unless it's a huge value in like the third or fourth round.
Oh, he's definitely not off my board. I think he's going to be drafted in the second round, but I am mostly conditioned to tight end premium leagues, which I prefer. So, but this tight end class, like you said, is probably
It's
the
deep.
best in years.
Yes.
So it should be interesting. So the last player we're going to be talking about is tight end from Georgia, tight end Darnell Washington. Washington measured at a towering 6'7", 264 pounds, with an arm length of 34 and 3/8 and a hand size of 11. He then ran a 40-yard dash time of 4.64 with a 10-second split time of 1.57 and a vertical jump of 31 and a broad jump of 10.2. In his junior season, he played 15 games and finished with 28 receptions, 454 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Dustin, what did you think of Darnell Washington's performance, and was he a riser or faller in your mind?
He's the Anthony Richardson of tight ends. He was out there and everyone, every time he got to do something, people were paid attention and they wowed over it. When they were doing the blocking sled, like he was the guy just he blocked it and was like, and they were like, all right, done. He was like, okay, and just like tossed it. And literally, I think almost tipped it over, like oh, with one hand. And those blocking sleds, like they got three people moving the back into place. He made this one-handed catch that was like it's a wide receiver catch. And now he wasn't known for his pass catching production in college, partially just because of the roster there. But like he showed that he could be out there and make these catches. Like I don't want to like compare him to some of the greats like Antonio Gates and Gonzalez because I don't think he's that good. But like he probably needs to work on that more because he just doesn't have the experience with pass catching. But his raw skills are there. He's this athletic specimen that within the right coaching, the right system that can mold him into it. Like he could be, he has the potential to be an elite, all time great tight end.
Yeah, to me, I mean, the athleticism was off the charts.
Off the
I
charts.
was, I was. There was definitely that wow moment when he had that one-handed catch that you're talking
Oh
about.
yeah, and the place lit up for that. Like they were like, oh, and everybody just recognized like, and so that day it was wide receivers, quarterbacks, wide receiver, quarterbacks, and then tight ends were from 6 o'clock at night to 8 o'clock at night after we had been there since 1 o'clock. So people were tired. The fans had definitely died down, but it was almost as loud as the Richardson when there was 10,000 fans. There was probably 2,000 fans. Like it was just like people were like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe these big lumbering guy like that made that catch."
He's a very mysterious prospect to me because, like you
Yes,
said, he's highly regarded as a blocker,
yes,
and his production is not much to look at. He hasn't really done a lot because the thing is, he's not even the best tight end on his team. I mean, Brock
yeah,
Bowers is going to be probably in the draft next year. You're talking about possibly a top 10 pick for a tight end.
yes,
I mean, he's
yep,
that good. So I think he's a lock for the first round in the NFL
yeah,
draft. I think someone is going to get enamored by that athleticism combined with the blocking. And I mean, the thing is, too, I mean, with the receiving drills, the gauntlet drill, I mean, it was smooth. He didn't have
smooth, real
problems. I
smooth.
thought he'd have more difficulty because he's known as a blocking tight end, but he really didn't have any issues. You would never have thought that. So to me, he's one of the biggest risers of the combine. He kind of it's not the same profile of player, but it kind of reminds me a little bit of OJ Howard, where OJ Howard didn't have much production at Alabama, but the athleticism was off the charts. So then he ended up getting drafted in the first round by the Buccaneers. I think the same thing happens. Again, not someone profile player. He kind of more as a Mercedes Lewis, but more
Yes,
athletic. So and then from a dynasty perspective, man, he's definitely a riser. I don't know what to think. I mean, Mayer is definitely the more clear player. But I mean, to me, it goes Kincaid, and then it's like it should be Mayer and then Washington. But I'm wanting to put Washington ahead of Mayer. I think the thing that we have to worry about from a fantasy perspective is I think he may end up just being like he's going to be employed so much with blocking. I just don't think he's going to get a lot of targets at the end of the day, and that's why I think he is that third guy.
yeah, he definitely needs a good system. So fit's going to matter, right? If he goes to a team that doesn't utilize a tight end or has a good pass catching tight end already, like we saw in college, and he just blocks, he's not going to. But like if he goes to a team that uses their tight end in the pass catching, like he has that potential. I think he's probably my as much as he rose. I think he's probably my fourth tight end. But we could be looking back in 5 years and go, he was the clear number one.
Yeah.
Like he has that potential. And so like if I can get him in the third round, I'm super happy. Even the end of the second, I would take a flyer on him if I've got a win now team and I can stash him on my taxi squad and just right because tight ends don't produce generally in year one, year two for fantasy. So you're talking year three. But if you can get them and stash them and like Have him as depth. Like if you have a Travis Kelce or George Kittle who are aging out, like he's a great guy to fill the role because in 3 years when Kelsey's done and Kittle's probably done, you might have a guy who can instantly fill that role on your team because he might be producing at that level at that time.
Yeah, it's crazy. We might be looking at 4 tight ends drafted in the first round, which I think might be the first time ever. But that does it for our NFL Combine Risers and Fallers, the wide receiver and tight end edition. We went over some of the prospects that we believe were risers and fallers and how it affected their draft stock. Like we had mentioned, we will be releasing a running back combine video later today as well, so be on the lookout for that episode. Hit that notification bell. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to our channel. Like I've been mentioning, we are continuing to put more and more off-season content out there, so you do not want to miss out. We're also on Spotify and Apple Podcasts if you prefer to listen. Don't forget to leave a comment on which wide receiver tight end you think increased or decreased their stock the most for the 2023 NFL Draft. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time.